There are tons of countries and cultures that have contributed greatly to fashion. French have given us chic styles to surrender in. Belgium has given us waffles and tabby boots. Well, sort of. Besides monstrosities of cuisine, British people have also created and defined a lot of unique patterns and textiles. Japan, besides exporting questionable depictions of underage cartoon characters, really created some of the most important avant-garde and streetwear styles today. And America, besides supplying the world with most of its weapons, has also created modern, rugged workwear and cowboy-inspired styles. There is a new culture exporting a unique sense of style. My name is Carson Craning, and today we are talking about South Korean or Korean style and how it's just absolutely dominating. This is particularly interesting because Korean style has only really recently become something that's taken off. But today we are going to break down what South Korean or Korean style is, how it developed and evolved into what it is today, and of course talk about a few brands that you'll probably need to know. To understand South Korean fashion, it's important to look at the history and the culture of the Korean peninsula. Context is important when you're looking at any country's culture because history has a direct impact on culture. When we look at Korea, it has a very long and complicated history, and a big part of that overall history is other foreign powers coming in and having an influence on the Korean peninsula. While the Korean peninsula's neighbors, China and Japan, are famously known for resisting foreign influence, Korea is sort of a melting pot of foreign cultural traditions with their own distinct Korean cultural traditions. Throughout the Korean peninsula's history, it's been invaded and controlled by different groups such as the Mongols, different Chinese dynasties, the Japanese, and the United States. So you have elements of Chinese, Japanese, American, and distinctly Korean traditions all mixing together to make what is today modern Korean culture. It's important to note that there is a lot of discourse, shall we say, among Koreans about how they feel about their culture, especially since in the last 100 years, Korea has been directly influenced heavily by not only the Japanese, but also the United States. Those influences on Korean culture are very fresh. And because of that, some Koreans feel that Korean culture is sort of in an identity crisis. And this sort of discourse bleeds its way into fashion discourse about Korea. Up until 2019 or around 2020, a lot of the discourse around Korea is that there weren't any designers coming out of Korea that had a distinctly Korean feel. Korea is the largest consumer of luxury clothing in the world. No other population spends close to what Koreans spend on fashion. Much of this is because of the influence of K-pop, and some Koreans were frustrated by this because while Korea is the largest consumer of fashion and these goods, there weren't many Korean designers stepping in and having large shares of that market. And much of that market share was dominated by foreign companies. And if there were Korean brands that were producing clothing, it felt as if that clothing being produced lacked a distinct style or Korean identity. That is until the 2020s. This is going to bring us into a part of the discussion where we're going to have to talk a little bit about what techwear is and the history of that. Techwear is a distinct genre of clothing that really separates itself heavily from the rest of luxury fashion. While the rest of luxury fashion is dominated mainly purely by aesthetics, techwear is really guided by the spirit of utility and technological innovation. Techwear's zeitgeist is just very different from the rest of luxury fashion. You may have seen techwear on the streets of Vancouver or San Francisco. Tech employees and Star Wars enthusiasts love techwear, so it's beyond the consumption of just regular fashion enthusiasts. That's because a lot of the aesthetics employed by techwear and in their marketing are somewhat futuristic and sci-fi influenced. And this makes techwear unique as it's the genre of fashion most embraced by gamers, who seek more functional pockets to store gamer fuel like Baja Blast and hand cream. Techwear's roots come from outdoors brands. From the 80s, 90s to 2000s, outdoor brands began experimenting with new patterns, fabrics, and other groundbreaking garment technologies to create performance wear that would really push the limits of the utility of clothing. Merle would be the godfather of techwear, as he would be one of the key figures who would see what these outdoor brands were doing, and he wanted to apply the same technology and utility into a more fashion-oriented aesthetic. Hugh worked to form the identity and the aesthetics of techwear, which really began to dominate in the early 2010s. It also helped that Hugh not only designed for his own brand, Acronym, but also for Nike ACG and Stone Island Shadow project. Because of this, Hyu's vision of techwear was what dominated techwear. While this certainly was a triumph for Hyu, it meant that the techwear aesthetic as a whole was pretty stagnant. For example, Hyu's design work heavily features joggers and cargo pants as a dominant pant silhouette. But as a result of that, for years, techwear was really only dominated by these silhouettes. You didn't see a lot of jeans, you didn't see a lot of silky, flowy pants. It was just these two silhouettes for the most part. Same goes with fabric. Hyu really loved to work with dark, synthetic fabrics, and because of that, really, techwear brands for a long time only used the dark synthetic fabrics. For a genre of clothing that kind of claimed it was all about technological innovation, for a long time the techwear scene was really stuck in the shadow of Hyu's work. That is until South Korean fashion began experimenting with the philosophy of techwear in the late 2010s. A lot of Korean companies were inspired by the ideals of techwear to deliver fashion-forward garments with superior fabric technologies and experimental techniques. And they followed in the steps of Hyu's work by experimenting heavily with pattern, making sure garments had a practical application, and looking towards performance and outerwear brands for inspiration. But they stepped outside of his shadow, in that they were more willing to experiment with different fabrics, silhouettes, and other design elements that made techwear feel more unique. So while techwear may have been started by a Canadian man, it really became adopted by South Korea. And the principles of techwear have really become South Korea's own unique discipline of garment design. South Korean techwear has really become the distinct Korean style that critics have claimed Korea is missing. So let's talk about some brands that really made an impact. Let's first talk about post-archive faction, or PAF. PAF was really the first Korean brand to break into the fashion scene with this distinct style. Founded by a collective with industrial design roots, post-archive faction focuses on technically altering their own vision of what a uniform should be. Every year, they provide their own unique vision and use technical design to provide a left, center, and right vision of their products. The left is considered to be more avant-garde or radical design, while the right is more conservative or practical. The center is sort of the middle ground in between these two visions. So each product has the left, radical or avant-garde product, the right, conservative, strictly more practical version of a product, and then the center, that middle ground between the two. This is extremely important because the traditional imprint or identity of techwear has always been that more conservative vision of clothing, focusing on that practicality and utility. PAF's left and center garments really introduced avant-garde and abstract expression into the world of techwear. This was really groundbreaking at the time, and there was nothing like what PAF was doing. Avant-garde expression and techwear just didn't overlap. Techwear was supposed to be all utility and practicality, while being avant-garde or expressing art in an abstract way was seen as the antithesis of practical. PAF's groundbreaking experimentation with techwear aesthetics changed the way we conceptualize techwear today, and as a whole, really lit the fire of Korean technical design. Next important brand to talk about is Hyien Seo. Hyien Seo was a Central St. Martin's graduate, and like PAF, she really broke the ground in Korean technical design. Where Hyien Seo stands out amongst all the other Korean technical designers is her application of those design principles. Seo uses technical design philosophy and really applies it to women's wear. Techwear as a genre has always really been a masculine-dominated subsect of fashion, but Seo aims to change that. Her designs go beyond the urban ninja use case, if you will, as she makes clothes for a variety of life situations. She makes more casual clothing for vacationing. She makes swimwear. She makes clothing that's more for going out or for clubbing. Or she makes more corporate and business casual clothing as well. There's also an undeniable Helmut Lang influence in her work. She also isn't afraid to take more traditional historical vintage pieces and really breathe a technical design philosophy into them. Next, I want to talk about XLIM. XLIM is another collective like post-archive faction, and what really makes them unique and thrive is their experimentation with fabric. XLIM has a slightly more palatable vision of technical design, opting to upgrade the patterns of a variety of more traditional silhouettes and styles, such as denim and workwear. So they launched these traditional styles, but with technical design and pattern work applied to them. And what really makes them special is how they procure some of the most unique and interesting fabric on the market. You will see just a variety of really unique fabrics with different textures applied to them. And what makes it even more cool is that they won't just stick with one cool fabric per garment. Oftentimes they'll take 2 to 3 different unique fabrics and apply them in different areas of the garment. So you'll have these very interesting garments that have a wide variety of unique textures all interplaying with each other to make something just super unique. And while there are a lot of wild, different fabrics and textures, it's also subtle and tasteful. It's really masterful what they're doing and requires a lot of discipline and time to make a garment this unique, but also this wearable. Next, I want to talk about Black Merle. Perhaps the gothic black sheep of the Korean technical world, Black Merle answers the question of what if techwear was combined with darkwear. Employing the techniques of unique pattern development and experimentation with fabric, Black Merle delivers a gothic, grungy vision of Korean technical design. Black Merle would fit right at home with the likes of Rick Owens and the Millimister and Boris Bajan Saberi, but its Korean design philosophy makes it stick out amongst the bunch. Jeong LI focuses more on a traditional gorpcore vision. He sort of works to bridge the gap between technical design meant for the city and technical design meant for the trail. Perhaps the most clearly practical and most suited for performance wear of the bunch, Jeong LI fits right in with the scene of other contemporary hiking brands such as LI or Roa. Kanghyuk focuses on creating unique dyeing and experimental fabrics. Like Margiela, Kanghyuk often uses fabrics and materials not traditionally meant for clothing. For example, Kanghyuk uses recycled materials that were often once tires, parachutes, airbags, ballistic nylon, and then dyes them in oil or other industrial materials to get really unique effects. Perhaps the most plainly experimental of the group, where you really see someone playing with the raw form of the garment in terms of the fabric.
Now, one brand we haven't talked about is Gentle Monster. It's another Korean brand, but it's a little different because it's sunglasses or eyewear. But one other differentiating feature is that it also had a start on all these other brands being founded and gaining popularity a few years before PAF. It's important for us to look at Gentle Monster because it shows the trajectory of these other South Korean brands. Gentle Monster, like I said, is a glasses brand and started launching unique eyewear in 2011. Now, breaking into the eyewear industry is nearly impossible, much harder than clothing, because the manufacturing and distribution is nearly a monopoly, with Luxottica owning 80% of the market. However, South Koreans quickly embraced the brand, making Gentle Monster the biggest eyewear brand in Korea. The world pays attention to the South Korean market demand, has powerful economic and trend repercussions. Gentle Monster is now becoming one of the quickest growing eyewear brands in the world and could someday really challenge the monopoly in place. The other brands in this South Korean renaissance of fashion are now on a similar path. While they may be a few years behind and they may not be the most popular in the world yet, they're quickly gaining the loyalty of a South Korean audience, and in turn slowly gaining more market share over one of the richest fashion audiences in the world. South Korea's influence is growing, and this renaissance of South Korean design is making waves. If these brands are on a similar path to Gentle Monster, which it looks like they are, these brands will be blowing up to be some of the biggest brands in the world soon.
And now you guys know why South Korea is dominating the fashion industry. If you'd like to see more videos like this, give me a follow, give me a like. My name is Karsten Craning. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.